Good evening, everyone. Good morning, depending on where you are. Welcome to this Filo Mining corporate presentation. Certainly very exciting times for the company. Filo Mining released drill results last week that can only be described as a game changer. Sure, you all seen the share price reaction stemming from that, and we are very excited about the future of Filo mining. So my name is Robert Eriksson. I work with corporate communication, media contacts, investor relations for the Lundin Group based in Stockholm, and I work closely together with my colleagues Amanda and Alina at Filo Mining. But without stealing any more thunder, we should jump into the presentation. Just wanted to remind everyone that there is an opportunity to ask questions, of course, and we would like to see as many questions as possible. These exciting times, we'll try to give answers to all of them. There is a Q&A function at the bottom of the screen that you should use, not the chat function, but the Q&A function. You will be able to write your questions, and I'll make sure that they are asked to Jamie and Bob at the end of the presentation. So we will hear today from Jamie Beck, CEO of Filo Mining, and Bob Carmichael, who's the Vice President Exploration. And without any further ado, I'll hand the floor over to Jamie.
Great. Thank you, Robert, and thanks to everyone for tuning in to get an update on the Filo project today. Obviously, an exciting few days for us. I encourage everybody to take a look at the cautionary statements on our presentation. Bob and I will be making statements that contain forward-looking information, so please read along at your leisure. So how to start? You know, I had a moment last week when I realized that the message at Filo needed to change. I think for so long we were talking about Filo as this exciting opportunity, and pay attention, we're onto something really special here. I think hopefully the results of hole 41 help solidify that. So the message now needs to be, well, you haven't missed a train. I think we believe that this remains an opportunity of unparalleled growth. And I'll walk you through a bit of a story today, starting with some history. But the message I want to get across is that this is a system that has the size and scale of an emerging mining district. Our recent results have the grades that are of the tenure that turn into mines. This is backed by a group that has a track record of driving shareholder returns in the industry. And we've got an exciting outlook in terms of near-term catalysts and future plans. So a bit of history. This is not an overnight success. This is a project that we have been working and was ultimately staked in 1999. I wanted to use terms like this is just the start, or we're just at the beginning. And in fairness to the Lundins and the perseverance and support of them driving these projects forward since that time, it's important to take a step back. After the team made the Veladero discovery and moved on, we staked the ground here, subsequently identifying numerous exploration targets on the border between Chile and Argentina. That has now resulted in 3 major discoveries: Los Helados, 3 billion tons; Jose Maria, 1.5 billion tons and moving towards production; and now Filo del Sol, which is arguably going to grow into the largest of the bunch. This is a picture on the right-hand side of the Potro Cliffs. It's one of the reasons that the guys were drawn to this area through Aster imaging, satellite photos, all that kind of stuff. And it sits about 10 kilometers to the north of the Filo deposit, or the center of the Filo deposit, and where we're drilling right now. And it's one of the largest steam-heated alteration zones in the Andes. So as you take a look at Filo and the outstanding results we were able to put out last week, I want to encourage investors not to focus entirely on this one project. It's spectacular. But this is an emerging mining district, and this is the kind of thing that gets us pretty excited. When you look at this on, in terms of size, sometimes it's really hard to get a sense of really what that means and to put things into perspective. So apologies for my really corny images on the next few slides, but I just wanted to give some perspective around, what do these sizes mean? What are we talking about here? So here, in a time when we can't travel, let's let Filo travel. This is a project that has about 70,000 meters of drilling in it, most of that shallow, between sort of 300, 400 meters, as was to define the oxide resource, in a zone that spans about 5 kilometers on strike and about 2 kilometers east-west. So, if we take that and overlay that on some of maybe your hometowns, I want you to think about how long it takes you to walk from one end of Central Park to the other in Manhattan, or really from the Don Valley Parkway to High Park. This is an enormous system, and the size and scale is really quite remarkable. As we think about that in 3 dimensions, here's the 3rd dimension, and the Burj Khalifa, the tallest building in the world. I'm showing that beside our intercept from hole 41 that was announced last week, which is some 300 or 30 meters taller than the tallest building in the world. And I think that size in and of itself isn't necessarily what's so special. It's that we're starting to develop an understanding of pretty special grades. And you can see where that really jumps out sort of around that 830 meter mark. Here's a picture of some of our core. That's what 11.5% copper equivalent looks like. So, take my best Robert Friedland impression. The goal here is really trying to give you guys some benchmarks, trying to give people a sense of understanding as to, how big are we talking? What size is this really? This is a chart that I've had in our corporate presentation for some time. All of these numbers, and if you note the copper equivalent doesn't necessarily match up. This is taken from SNL Metals and Mining and their drill hole database, and ranks the best holes in the copper space over the past 2 years. I think what really stands out here is the scarcity of these types of discoveries. And when you take a look at Onto in Indonesia, a spectacular discovery by Vale, and Filo del Sol now stands head and shoulders above some of the other names on this list, which in and of themselves are really spectacular deposits. So that brings me to my my 3rd bullet from the beginning, track record. I think shareholders taking a look at Argentina and wanting to know a little bit about how we have performed in the past only look at the record here. And when you think about International Musto and the Bajar Alumbrera copper project, that was a takeout by Rio Algom in North. Then Argentina Gold and the Veladero discovery, some 100 kilometers south of Filo in San Juan province. Ultimate hostile takeout by Homestake, now Beck. This is a group that has had success delivering value to shareholders, not only around the globe, but around the world. And arguably, I should include Lundin Gold on the list now, because that's an example of success in actually developing and bringing a project into construction, and quite a story in Ecuador, in a challenging work environment, and an amazing job by Ron and the whole team down there. So this is a group that has the pedigree to advance these types of projects, and has the pedigree to to keep driving shareholder value here. Over the weekend, I was trying to think about how to convince you that we still had some room to run, and that's when Filo was still at an 800 some odd market cap. We've grown since then, but I think the comparisons remain valid. We've seen some really awesome discoveries in the copper space over the past couple of years. Our friends at Solaris, they've done an outstanding job and taken that company to to $1 billion north. Here's an overview of sort of how that Solaris drill pattern looks within what we're finding at Filo, and a view towards our hole side by side. So, you know, this is a project that has incredible size with respect to some of our peers, and I think guides to where we see continued upside in the shares. You know, again, another great discovery, Alpala Sol Gold. This is 3 billion tons of 0.35 copper in Ecuador, and you know, overlaid on our Filo long section, you can start to see what 3 billion tons, you know, looks like. And hole 46, which Bob will talk about a little bit later, is one that we're starting to drive down deep. It's actually an undercut of one of our historic holes, 32, and is currently below 1,500 meters and still going. So, you know, I think it's a super exciting time in the industry to be sitting on some of these discoveries. I think our peers have shown that you can generate significant value here. These are the types of assets that the majors are going to be keen on, and hopefully Filo is now, you know, going to rank into that same company. So listen, that's probably enough for me. I think the man of the hour is really Bob, our exploration team, and the incredible job that they've done. So I'll hand it over to Bob and let him walk through some of our exciting exploration results from the season.
Thanks, Jamie. You can probably flip to the next slide there. And thanks to everyone for tuning in this morning. And also a big thanks to our field crew down on site here, working through what's been a very challenging exploration season. We had the guys work right through the holiday season this year. There's been a lot of quarantining going on, and it's been a challenge down there. And we've got some people who are working extremely hard in difficult conditions to make all this happen in the field. What I wanted to do is just put a bit of context around some of the results that we've released this season and last season, keeping in mind that this is very much a work in progress, and we're really a long ways from fully understanding what's going on here geologically. In 2018, with the PFS nearing completion, we made a strategic decision to put some further engineering studies on hold until we really understood what this deposit was. All the holes at that time ended in mineralization. We saw increasing grades with depth and to the north. We knew that the deposit was going to be a lot bigger than what we'd seen to that time, and we really wanted to spend some time to find out how big it was going to be. Last season, 2019-2020, really confirmed that we made the right decision. We were rewarded with holes 32 and 34, which you can see on the slide here, both intersections in excess of 1,000 meters. That's some very compelling grades. And then it was dramatically reinforced, I think, this year with hole 41, where we're now not only starting to get an idea of how big this system is, but what 41 shows is that size can also come with high grades, and that's really the critical combination for a truly great project. The image on the left is just a satellite image showing the location of the current season holes. And I think it gives a good idea that the expansion potential here is not just at depth, but it's also to the north and to the east of the current resource, which is shown by that red outline there. Go to the next one, Jamie, please. So I just wanted to take a minute and give a bit of geological context to the drill results, again, keeping in mind that this is a work in progress. And most of our drill sections only have one hole on them, which makes it difficult to do too much in terms of detailed interpretation. But what I'm showing here is 3 east-west vertical sections, 200 meters apart, with the section 8800 on the left being furthest to the south. The gray, green, and blue colors are the host rock for the deposit. They're Permo-Triassic rhyolites and granites, which are very widespread in this area of the Andes. They're between 270, 230 million years old. They're much, much older than the mineralization itself, and they host the porphyries and the ensuing mineralization. The pink color shows a crude representation of the porphyritic intrusive rocks, which formed the deposit. And they're only about 13 to 16 million years old and are part of a well-defined Miocene porphyry belt, which trends along the Andes throughout Chile and Argentina. The pit limit for the resource is shown with that blue line there. And I think it's important to note that anything drilled outside of that blue line is not contained in our current mineral resource. what you can see there is fairly obvious potential for a pretty dramatic expansion of the resource as we start to gather more information and do that work. The other thing to note is that these holes are either adjacent to or either to the side or below that blue line. And I think that's a really important point, is that although some of these intersections start 200 to 300 meters below surface, that surface through the PFS project is going to be very much lowered as we mine out the oxide zone, and we don't have overlying barren waste rock on these intersections. In terms of expansion potential, you can see that in addition to north and at depth, we also have room to expand this deposit out to the east. Hole 44 on the left-hand slide there is completely open. We've got hole 47, which shoots off to the east of it, and we have assays pending for that hole. In the middle section, you can see hole 46, which is a 200-meter step out from hole 32, and you got to keep in mind the scale here. It doesn't look very far on that section, but that's the 2 football field step out. We have assays pending for that hole as well. And then our hole 41 on the north, we really don't have a lot of information around there. The closest hole to that is 170 meters to the south. And then to the north, it's 450 meters to the next nearest hole. The other thing just to point out here is hole 32 is the only one we've got that seems to cut right through that porphyry. And you can see good grades within the porphyry itself, but better grades seemingly flanking it. And I think if you look at the other 2 sections, we can expect to have the mineralization in those holes continuing quite a long ways to the west as well. So we've got room to expand this deposit pretty significantly in several different directions. Go to the next one, Jamie, please. So this is a longitudinal section. It's perpendicular to the sections you saw on the last image. Those images, maybe you can just point them out, Jamie, where hole 34, 44, 32, and 41 were. So those 3 images span that distance there. The resource pit here is in gray, and again, anything outside of that resource pit is in addition to the current resource. And Jamie mentioned the 70,000 meters of drilling, historic drilling here. Most of that is contained within that pit resource shell and is fairly shallow holes. The colors just represent copper equivalent values. You can see the scale at the bottom, with purple being greater than 0.7. And you can see high grade material spanning the 1.4 kilometer distance from hole 34 in the south to hole 43 in the north. And the job remaining to us is to infill drill that and try to define it, quantify it, and also see what other surprises are lurking in there. It's worth mentioning that holes 25 and 26 off to the south on the left of the screen, although not as sexy as some of the recent holes, returned some pretty decent intersections. 25 was 1,025 meters of 0.47 copper equivalent, and 26 was 614 meters of 0.65 copper equivalent. They both ended in mineralization, and they both represent material that would be above cutoff grade in the resource. So we're kind of focused in on the higher grades that we see around holes 32 and 41. But I don't want to forget about some pretty compelling intersections we've got down to the south, which really starts to increase our sandbox here to the 4 kilometer length shown by the arrow at the top of that image. Distances, I mean, it's easy to look at this image and you get the impression that things are close together. So I just wanted to point out that if you go from the bottom of 41 to the bottom of hole 43, that's 700 meters. And hole 37 indicates that we can expect to find continuous mineralization between that. So we do have a lot of room here to continue to find nice high-grade surprises within this. All of these holes, again, continue to end in mineralization. You can see 46 here that Jamie mentioned poking out the bottom. It's now over 1,500 meters, and we're quite excited about what that hole is going to tell us. Off to the north, there's an old RC hole just above hole 51 there that had some very interesting copper gold grades that we're following up with hole 51. We've got hole 42 shown there, which had 48 meters at 1 gram per ton gold in really a new oxide gold zone that we don't know too much about. And we're also drilling another step out hole 350 meters to the north of 51 to test the geophysical signature that's very similar to what we see over the deposit. So we are continuing to do exploration holes here, and that will continue. We'll get into a mix of delineation drilling to see how big the high grade part of this deposit is, fill in the areas between 34 and 43. But we also have a lot of exploration potential left here to continue to discover new zones. Go to the next one, Jamie, please. So just a quick recap of our initial news release back in March, highlighted by the intervals shown in the table and in the summary boxes above. Again, they're pretty compelling intersections, and these are big step outs. 43 was, as we mentioned, a very large step out to the north. We didn't really know what we were going to get in that hole, and we were very pleasantly surprised by the intersection we did get. So we do have lots of expansion potential left in this deposit. Flip to the next one, Jamie. And I just finally wanted to touch on an exploration target that we developed last year. So it's just looking very high level conceptually with the qualifiers noted on the right-hand side of the slide in front of you there, just to get a sense of what kind of potential we've got here when we ultimately do develop this into a resource. And linking together those holes that we had at that time, we came up with a range of 1.2 to 1.6 billion tons at a copper equivalent grade of between 0.7 and 1%. That would be in addition to our current resource. Again, that's entirely outside of the PFS resource pit shell. And I think you can see with holes 41, 37, and 43, as well as the infill holes 49 and 48, as we start to infill that shape, that that the very obvious potential not only to realize that sort of tonnage and material and grade, but obvious potential to expand it as well. So I just wanted to leave you with a bit of a feeling as to where we think this deposit is going to get in terms of tons and grade. We need a lot more work to get there, but I think we're well on our way this season, and we'll continue to drill throughout the remainder of the year. And with that, I'll pass it back over to you, Jamie, to provide a bit of a perspective on the PFS project.
Sure. Thanks, Bob. Great summary. Okay, so our PFS, I think, again, this is driving at the optionality that exists at a project like Filo. So many of these big Andean porphyries come with big price tags in terms of upfront capital to get going, and it's the infrastructure and the size that's required to get these big projects up and going. I think what Filo presents is another option here. And in 2019, we completed a PFS on the oxide cap, which is really the call it the tip of the iceberg or the cherry on top. This was a project that we ran at $3 copper and 1,300 gold. If you use those prices, it was 1.2 billion NPV and a 23% after-tax IRR. This is a project expected to produce 70,000 tons of copper, about 160,000 ounces of gold, and over 8.5 million ounces of silver annually. The revenue split here is about 55% copper, 45% for the precious metals. So pretty interesting numbers. I mean, let that silver number sink in a little bit. That's 120 million ounces over the 13-year mine life of this PFS. And optionality, when you think about the initial capex here, we had driven at 1.3 billion US dollars to get this project up and going. Having something like that silver, which makes up 15% of your revenue stream, it gives options to get going. As we ratchet metal prices up and we take a look at where things sit today, the PFS, our pre-strip, our little starter pit, is actually closer to something north of $2 billion and a 30% IRR at whatever sort of long-term metal price you want to consider. So it's a compelling start, and I think gives options in terms of getting up here, getting something going. The strip ratio on this was 1.4 to 1, and you saw the potential to drive the pit deeper or to think about pulling in more parts of the deposit as we learn more about it. So, you know, Filo has options, and I think that's one of the things that's quite compelling about the project as well. So what's next? And really draws things to a conclusion before I'll open up to questions. You know, current status, we have 3 holes complete with assays pending. That's 47, 48, and 50. Unfortunately, 50 did not get down to target depth. We had drilling problems during the season, so we won't totally get down to see what that hit. 46, Bob mentioned, we're now over 1,500 meters deep. 49, 51, 52, and 53, which is way off to the north, remain underway. Drilling is planned through the end of May 2021. Some of those holes will get to target depth. Some of them may not. So, you know, I guess I can't really guide on whether or not we'll have final assays for all of those holes back. There may be an opportunity for us to try and get back up next season and deepen them. We do need to pause, mostly for maintenance and winterization. We did not plan on keeping this program going throughout the season. So there's a bit of work in terms of insulating water tanks and preparing the drills, getting better shelters for the team. But the plan is that once that work is done and through the end of June, July, that we could hopefully get back up and drilling again in August. Plans coming up, drilling this season clearly confirms Filo as one of the most compelling exploration projects globally. You know, I think we found this high grade zone discovered in 41. That's not the end of it. There remain multiple compelling exploration targets on the property. We've used the term game changing, or you know, it redefines what we're thinking about here. And Bob and I chatted about this earlier. What we mean when we say that is really getting a sense of the tenor of the types of grades that we hit this year. I think shifts the company focus. Before, we were taking these, you know, big step outs to try and just understand the size and scale of the deposit. We'll continue to do a little bit of that, but we'll also then focus in on that high grade zone in the middle and see whether or not we can build that out and confirm some of that into an initial inferred resource, which hopefully we can work towards by the year end. Planning for our next holes, you know, we did a big geophysical program over the project last season. That takes interpretation, that takes correlating back to the geochemistry. So we'll update our model, we'll work on reviewing that geophysics work in light of the new geochemistry and see whether or not that helps guide our future exploration programs. I mentioned we'll start back up in August, I hope, with probably 3 to 4 rigs, and then plans to build into a larger program. Certainly during the most productive drilling months down there are November through March into April. We're working closely with the Jose Maria guys in camp expansion. It's currently about 200 beds. We're trying to get that to over 800 beds. As you can imagine, in this unique pandemic period, we've been constrained on the number of people we can have in camp in terms of how many are in each room, kind of thing. So that additional camp capacity will help with our plans and with Jose Maria plans. Clearly lots to learn about metallurgy, and we've got a very preliminary program ongoing this season, but we'll do a more extensive one next year, focused on the sulfides and understanding met response there. And I encourage investors to closely monitor progress at Jose Maria, you know, as they move forward towards fiscal stability, project financing, and ultimately a construction decision. And you know, tying right back up to my opener, Filo may well prove to be the crown jewel here, but this is a district in the making, and we're really excited. So without further ado, thanks, Robert. I'll flip it back over to you and let us know if there's any questions coming in.
Thank you very much, Jamie and Bob. And I'm happy to say that we have a lot of questions and we have about 25 minutes to answer them. So let's get going right away. And I'll start with a question to Bob, I think. This is quite an advanced geological question that we have got from a shareholder in Thailand, who would like to start with congratulating the team on a fantastic set of drill holes. The question is about USTs in the core, if you have observed any USTs in the core.
I guess the short answer to the question is I don't know at this point. And one thing to just keep in mind is that this core is all pretty recently drilled and very few people have seen it. I mean, with the travel restrictions in place, I've not been down to look at this core. Even some of our more senior guys in Buenos Aires have not been able to get up and look at it. So at this point, we have core photos. We have our geologist on site doing the logging. But clearly we've got a lot more work to do to really dig into and understand some of the details we're seeing here. And I just looking through the list of questions, I see some detailed geological questions. So I'll answer them as best I can, but it's early days. We've got a lot to learn yet. So on the USTs, not sure whether we've got any in the core or not.
Here we have another question, and I don't know if Bob or Jamie would like to respond to it, but given the excellent drilling results at Filo del Sol and the obvious scale of the underlying sulfide, how does that affect the validity of the layout of the heap leach infrastructure described in the PFS? Can it still be located where it was intended to be?
Yeah, no, great question, Robert. I'll take that. I think it guides to the reason why we needed to undertake this deeper or drilling program. One of the beauties of this this landscape, and maybe I'll just flip back to my the opening slide. We're not constrained with space. There's lots of space to put stuff. What we didn't know is exactly where we wanted to put stuff, and I think the drilling this season will likely guide us wanting to make sure that the heap leach pads or the crushing facilities or things that were planned for the pre-feasibility study, that we've got that in the right place, and it ultimately doesn't sterilize the longer term development of a sulfide project here. So lots more work from an engineering perspective. Is it in terms of the ultimate size of the open pits, access, if this is a kind of thing that moves underground. So we've got space to move things around. And inevitably, given where this sits right now, the exact layout is likely to change a little bit. But again, we're not suffering from space and ability to place infrastructure and equipment in and around the deposit.
And thank you very much for that, Jamie. We also have some questions about potential future partnerships, of course, and we take one of them here. When looking for a partnership, what is the preferred profile of a partner? Is it one of the major mining companies with a mining know-how and deep pockets, or is it one of the metal conglomerates with equally deep pockets, but more in the role of a silent supporting partner to secure deliveries for themselves?
Yeah, of course, we're going to start getting that question probably more and more. I first and foremost point to the breadth of knowledge and the depth of the bench that exists within the Lundin Group of companies. This is not a junior company that doesn't have some experience and expertise to rely on, and that may not exist right now within Filo. At Jose Maria, the team is building out, and we're bringing that expertise in-house as they develop that. So, we're not actively out there searching partnerships or joint ventures at this point in time. Our goal is moving the district forward. Clearly, if something comes in bounds and it makes sense and it drives shareholder value, the group has had great success in the past with all sorts of structures, from joint ventures with big mining companies, in the Congo, to full on takeouts. So, the goal here is creating value, and we want shareholders to come along. As I say, I think we've got the ability to hold our hand on our heart and say we're moving these things forward. I get to keep exploring while Adam has to push through the permitting and construction at least at this point in time. But lots of options.
Thank you, Jamie. And we also have questions about this deposit being located both in Argentina and partly stretching into Chile. Are you looking at it as a pure Argentinian play today?
No, I get that a lot as well, Robert. Our view is the binational treaty protocol and the operating sort of situation we've got right now. Obviously, COVID's made it hard. We haven't been able to access the project from the Chilean side, but normally we've got great access from both sides. Comes with some additional permitting challenges. We're going to need to permit in both countries. But it comes with great opportunities as well. If this was a project entirely in Chile, we'd be looking at having a desalination facility and pumping water up from the coast. So access to groundwater in Argentina is a huge advantage for the project. And we'll monitor progress in both countries. Our view is that the binational treaty here facilitates a cross-border project like this moving towards development. Obviously, all of the deep drilling that we're doing this year is entirely in Argentina. Everything to the northeast that we're exploring for right now is entirely in Argentina as well. So, this is we view this as the center of gravity in Argentina for sure. And if that's something we needed to look at in terms of one country versus the other, of course, that's something we could do. But our view is that it remains a viable cross-border project.
The next question here is on the size of the mineralization. Is it so that it could potentially extend beyond the existing Filo del Sol acreage? And if so, are you now trying, or will you try to extend your acreage position?
Well, let's take a look at the, at this map. Clearly between the family-run, companies, NGX, Jose Maria, and Filo, we've got a pretty substantial part of that ground already tied up. I think there's great opportunity for extension of the resource, and we have multiple exploration targets within that land package that extend beyond where we are. I think Filo is really unique. We're onto something special here, and there's no shortage of places for us to put the drill bit into within our own land package as it sits right now.
Thank you, Jamie. And here's one question specifically for you, and we've had that from many shareholders attending this presentation today, and that's for you to describe a little bit more about the synergies between Filo Mining, Filo del Sol, and the Jose Maria deposit.
Great question. Synergies as we speak right now are some shared personnel and shared infrastructure. We share a camp. It helps reduce our costs. I have to share Bob sometimes, which is a bit unfortunate because I could use him all the time. But as these grow and as these start to get developed, Jose Maria is going to bring a road. Jose Maria is going to bring a power line. Jose Maria is going to develop a water well fields to move that project forward. And all of that reduces Filo's upfront capital. So when you look at $1.3 billion for our initial PFS project, that number drops as Jose Maria gets the green light. When you think about longer term, who knows? These companies are split in terms of corporate structure, but we share a similar major shareholder. Clearly, they'll have a $3 billion sulfide processing facility that's 10 or 12 kilometers away from us, and there may be options for us to look at working with them at expanding that facility and growing as we process the sulfide deposit at depth. Ultimately, the oxides are a slightly different processing method in terms of the heap leach, in terms of how we want to consider that moving forward. And again, there's a bit of a can of worms there. There's lots of different options in terms of even pushing forward the PFS. We looked at grinding and agitated leach and tank leaching the oxide project. So does it now make sense for us to install grinding capacity at Filo as well and look towards an agitated leach there and different processing? It's really early days, Robert, and we'll have to evaluate what makes sense. But getting Jose Maria up and off the ground is going to be a huge benefit for Argentina. It's going to be a huge benefit for the copper space, and clearly for Filo del Sol.
I think the next question is for Bob. It comes from a shareholder asking about the arsenic content in the drill results. Have you seen any arsenic, and what bearing will that have for this project going forward?
Yeah, we do see arsenic in the high sulphidation part of the mineralization. There's a question also about mineralogy I noticed somewhere. So that a lot of the mineralization there is tenantite. We don't see much in the way of an argite, bornite, and chalcopyrite. We've got a lot of work to do on the metallurgical test work here. We've got some initial results that look very promising. So I don't know, it's early days to understand the arsenic distribution in the deposit. We've also got a lot of mineralization, particularly in the south, where we have absolutely no arsenic in it. So it'll be a mix as we continue to drill out the deposit, and we'll look at doing the test work to understand how to deal with that. Jamie,
Yeah, maybe Robert, I'll just add in there. I get this question lots. For me, it's a cost issue and not a fatal flaw. You know, this is a deposit. We've got sections in hole 25, for example, that are going to run 0 arsenic, and then you know, right up to that intersection and you know, where we're talking about 11.5% copper equivalent. That's the stuff that's going to come with our high sulphidation epithermal overprinting, and that's going to carry deleterious elements. So we've got options that ultimately will need to be explored in terms of blending at the mine site, in terms of you know, potential processing, whether or not that's test work to look at roasting and volatilization of the arsenic and ultimate vitrification, or you know, leaching of the concentrates. We'll have SXEW installed as part of the oxide project, so that brings things like POX into the mix and being able to you know, advance there. So again, it's something to monitor. When you've got a 0.5% ore body, it's something to be a little bit concerned about. With the types of grades that we're talking about right now, I think it's something that can be managed, and it's a cost issue.
Thank you both, Bob and Jamie. And I just want to say that we're grateful for getting so many really good questions. Unfortunately, there is a hard stop here just before the hour, because Jamie will do some marketing that has been decided since before. But I think it's fair to say that we'll come back to you hopefully fairly soon with a new presentation and try to answer the rest of the questions. But we have a few more that we have time to respond to. Next one is, if it has not been stated in the presentation, how will future drill campaign look after the current one is done? Will you make a much bigger one with 100,000 meters drilled or something like that? How many drill rigs will you be using going forward?
Yeah, you know, yet to be determined. Thanks for the question. I think we'll evaluate our results this season. We will perform our camp winterization effort. We'll work with Jose Maria on the camp expansion and look to see what makes sense. As I mentioned in the presentation, initially starting at sort of 3 to 4 rigs, and then gradually look to build that out. You know, clearly this is a deposit that could use another 100,000 meters of drilling. Certainly what we'll be able to accomplish over the next season. I'll work with Bob and our geos and our drillers and figure out what makes sense.
Thank you, Jamie. Next question is about the results, and will the recent results and advancement of Jose Maria's precipitate a rethink of the oxide pre-feasibility study, particularly regarding on-site and off-site infrastructure, relocation of on-site infrastructure to avoid sterilizing sulfides, etc., piggybacking on Jose Maria rather than coming through Chile, etc. I think we've touched upon some of this before, but maybe worth extending on the answer.
Well, I think it speaks to the amount of work ahead of us in terms of trying to figure out all the options there and what makes the most sense. Probably a bit premature for us to comment on that, Robert, at this point in time. Head down, focused on trying to understand exactly what we're sitting on. We need that in hand before we can start advancing more seriously the potential options in terms of long-term development here. So great question. I share it myself. Let's put our hats on towards exploration and defining the deposit here, and we'll revisit that as time moves on.
As we all know, this is fairly high altitude, the Filo del Sol deposit. So we do have a few questions about how you handle the altitude and winterization issues now and in the future when this is an operational mine.
Yeah, it's about 5,000 meters above sea level, so no one's running a marathon up there. I think in terms of precedent, this is not the first high altitude operation that's up there in the Andes. Clearly, Veladero to our south, Maricunga to the north. I visited both of those operations. They deal with the same altitude climate issues that we will face at Filo. They usually plan on about 7 to 10 days of operating disruptions annually. And mostly that's a result of whiteout conditions from snow. So they'll get a day where you can't really see where you're driving and it becomes a safety concern. So in terms of operating, lots of precedents at altitude and in this environment. And then technology obviously brings in lots of new options. If we can have people sitting in a comfortable space, remotely operating autonomous mine trucks or autonomous drill and blast, and opportunities for us to bring people down from the hill and working in an environment that's a little bit more comfortable, that's great too. And we'll explore all of that new technology as this moves towards construction here.
Thank you, Jamie. And we also have some questions around the financial position. And one of them is asking, what are the plans to finance the exploration program going forward? And what does the financial situation for the company look like today?
Sure. We're sitting on about $28 million as of the recent quarter. So the company's well funded and certainly well into the end of the North American summer and into the fall. So, no immediate plans to raise money. I think given what we're on to and how excited Lucas was on the phone over the weekend, I wouldn't be surprised if he funded the whole thing himself. Obviously a bit tongue in cheek, but we've had strong shareholders, and I think this is a really exciting start to what we think is going to keep growing, and pretty sure that lots of people are going to want to be involved.
Certainly exciting. How long is it likely to take to delineate the high-grade zone?
Ooh, I don't know. Maybe Bob? Put you on the spot.
That's an interesting question. Yeah, I mean, what we're going to do differently is start increasing the length of our drill season, as Jamie said, add some drills and really put the effort into getting as many meters drilled and as many holes as we can. So the plan is to really start doing that and start drilling it out. What I'm looking to do is to come up with an initial inferred resource towards the end of the year. And then we'll just continue to expand that as we get drill results in and upgrade it to indicated. So, I mean, we're going to learn with every hole. It's difficult to predict still what we're going to get, but I would look to see something along the lines of that schedule, some kind of inferred resource before the end of this current year. And then in terms of drilling it out, I mean, we're still expanding it. So it's a very difficult question to answer.
Bob, you're the man of the day, I think. There are a lot of geological questions here, so we do another one of those, which I unfortunately think has to be the last question for an answer for today. What was the strategy for the remaining holes that are still waiting for the results from? Especially interested in hole 46, that seems to be very deep alongside a successful hole 32, and hole 52 seems to directly target the assessed feeder zone vertically in order to prove vertical connection to the silver zone.
Not entirely sure what it means by strategy. I guess the strategy is to work as hard as we can to complete those holes by the end of this month. And we'll have assays back. The turnaround time has actually been reasonably good at the lab. We've got a lot of hear stories about COVID-related delays in assay labs. We're not really seeing that in South America so much for now. So we'll release the results of those holes as we get them in. And at this point, I would anticipate that to be late June, early July, before we'd have all the assay results out from the current program.
Thank you very much, Bob. And with that, I would like to thank certainly Jamie and Bob for today's presentation that has been recorded, that will be available on Filo Mining's website shortly. And but especially I would like to say thank you to everyone attending today. And we have so many questions, so rest assured that we will come back with a new presentation, with new results, and the opportunity to answer more questions from our shareholders. So thank you very much for attending tonight.
Thanks, Robert.